In the week leading up to Christmas, everyone is bustling about, buying gifts, planning festive dinners, and arranging gatherings with loved ones. The usual pre-holiday atmosphere permeates the air, but not for the Blage family. Instead, they find themselves in a courtroom in the city of Muskegon, attending a hearing about the brutal crime that claimed their daughter as a victim. During the victim impact statements, the unthinkable happens. The convicted man brazenly stands up, asks for permission to leave, and while exiting, blows a mocking air kiss at the Blage family. The room erupts in outrage, with shouts of "coward" and "monster" ringing out. But for the criminal himself, such audacious behavior is nothing new. The Blage family's case is not his first. 25-year-old Jessica Hiringa worked at an Exxon gas station in Norton Shores, Michigan. She devotedly cared for her young son, for whom she lived and spared no effort. Her partner, Dakota Quayle Dyer, had recently lost his job, so Jessica took on any shifts she could to support the family. Despite their rocky relationship, she strove to keep the family together while battling a substance abuse problem that had taken hold shortly before the tragic events. Co-workers described Jessica as a kind and diligent employee who was trying to make amends for past mistakes. She usually preferred day shifts, but during that period, she agreed to work nights to earn more money. On the evening of April 26, 2013, around 2:40 p.m., Jessica stopped by a grocery store before arriving at the gas station in her uniform by 5 p.m. The day unfolded as usual. Customers pulled in to refuel, some entered the store. Nothing seemed amiss until around midnight, when an ominous call came into the emergency services. The caller reported that no one could be seen inside or outside the gas station, even though the lights were on, the doors were open, and an abandoned car was parked by the pumps. The premises looked untouched, as if the attendant had only stepped away for a moment. But the clock showed well past 11 p.m., and the shift was still ongoing. Arriving at the scene, officers immediately noticed suspicious details. A woman's jacket, a wallet with cash, and cigarettes lay in their places, indicating that the employee, who judging by the items was female, had not intended to leave. The last purchase at the register was recorded at 10:55 p.m., a lighter. Soon, drops of blood and a piece of a laser sight from a firearm were discovered outside. Robbery was quickly ruled out, as the money in the register and wallet remained untouched. A check revealed that it was 25-year-old Jessica Hiringa who had gone missing. She was supposed to work that night, but something sinister had happened the day before. Investigators had few leads to go on. The gas station had no surveillance cameras, and the fact that a young woman was working the night shift alone, without security, was particularly alarming. Law enforcement began interviewing potential witnesses and reviewing footage from nearby cameras. One of the first to respond was the station manager. She recounted that around 11 p.m., while riding past on motorcycles with her husband, she noticed a silver minivan parked behind the station. The woman initially found the parking spot odd and suspicious, thinking perhaps someone was planning a robbery. Her intuition told her to slow down and monitor the situation. She saw a man exit the minivan, open the rear doors, and start doing something. The woman backed away, keeping an eye on him. After a few minutes, the stranger got into the vehicle and drove off. Not noticing anything overly alarming, the manager followed suit. She had no idea that within mere minutes, her colleague Jessica would vanish without a trace. Later, during questioning, the woman described the suspicious man. He was wearing an orange hoodie and had curly hair. This information gave investigators their first lead, along with the description of the silver minivan. A review of surveillance footage from around the gas station quickly yielded results. 3 different cameras captured a Chrysler Town and Country minivan leaving the station between 11:02 p.m. and 11:05 p.m. Canvassing witnesses nearby also bore fruit. One man recalled seeing someone in a silver minivan talking to Jessica that night, acting overly persistent and flirtatious. The witness described the stranger, curly hair, wearing red or orange clothing. This was now the second independent account pointing to the same individual as the last person seen with Jessica before her disappearance. But the most alarming incident had occurred the day before. A regular customer of the gas station had stopped by on the evening of April 25, close to closing time. She witnessed Jessica conversing with an unknown man and, concerned, asked her why she was working nights alone, as it was dangerous. The suspicious stranger interjected, remarking that customers were looking out for Jessica. This response sounded odd and unsettled the woman. Glancing at Jessica, she noticed her shake her head in fright. The customer decided to wait in her car until Jessica closed the station and went home. Only after ensuring the suspicious individual had also left the premises did the woman drive away. This account perfectly matched the descriptions previously provided by the station manager and the other witness. The police finally had a portrait of the probable abductor. A composite sketch was created, and several press conferences were held urging the public to assist in locating the missing Jessica and any information about the suspect. But despite all efforts, the investigation hit a dead end, with no new leads surfacing. The mother of a 3-year-old boy had vanished without a trace, and no one could say what had happened to her. As time passed, Jessica Hiringa's case gradually went cold. On June 29, 2014, 14 months after her disappearance, a woman's body was discovered near a house in Dalton Township, Michigan. It was 36-year-old Rebecca Blech, who had gone out for a jog and fallen victim to a brutal attack involving a firearm. This incident shook the local community. First, Jessica had disappeared under mysterious circumstances, and now another woman had been killed by an unknown assailant. Shell casings and bullets were found at the scene of Rebecca's murder, but not a single clue pointed to the killer's identity. People began to notice an eerie similarity between the cases. Like with Jessica's disappearance, the investigation into Rebecca's murder dragged on without visible progress. 2 more years passed before the perpetrator struck again. And this third attack would prove pivotal. On April 16, 2016, a young girl from Laketon Township was walking home from a party and got lost. A silver minivan pulled up beside her, and the driver offered to let her use his phone. The girl agreed and, though hesitant, got into the vehicle. But as soon as she was inside, the man locked the doors and pulled out a gun. Gripped by fear, the girl realized the gravity of her mistake. But the survival instinct kicked in. She persuaded the attacker to open the window, ostensibly to get some fresh air, and seizing the chance, leapt from the car. Despite injuries sustained in the struggle, she managed to escape. Fortunately, the girl not only survived but also remembered the face of her assailant. She immediately went to the police and identified the minivan driver as the suspect. It turned out to be Jeffrey Willis, a man who had already come to the attention of law enforcement and even had a criminal record. A search of his vehicle uncovered a pistol with a laser sight that was missing its battery compartment cover, and the serial number had been deliberately filed off. Moreover, syringes filled with a clear liquid, later identified as a potent sedative, were found in the van, along with other items used for violent acts, ropes, handcuffs, and so on. In effect, Willis's minivan was a mobile torture chamber. It was only by a miracle that the girl had avoided a horrific fate. Had she not escaped, restoring the erased serial number on the gun could have taken much longer. However, thanks to the coordinated efforts of experts, it was discovered that the pistol was registered to Jeffrey Willis's colleague, who had previously reported her weapon missing. And it was this very gun that was equipped with a laser sight. All the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place: a suspicious man with a propensity for his silver minivan, a weapon that had featured in other crimes. Too many coincidences to be dismissed as chance. In September 2016, more than 3 years after Jessica's disappearance and 4 years after Rebecca's murder, police obtained a warrant to search Jeffrey Willis's home and vehicle. On his home computer, investigators found numerous files containing content depicting the abuse of women and children. A particularly shocking discovery was a mysterious folder labeled VIX, inside which were 2 subfolders, G, L, H, and R, S, B. The abbreviation stood for Jessica Lynn Hiringa and Rebecca Sue Blech. The folders contained photographs of both victims and newspaper clippings related to their disappearances and murders. The investigation gained momentum when experts began examining the suspects' computers. One of them was password protected, and the password turned out to be a combination of Jessica's name and the date of her disappearance, G4L27H13. Furthermore, a gun was found in Jeffrey's house, and ballistic analysis confirmed that it was the very pistol from which the bullets had been fired, with casings left at the scene of Rebecca Bletch's murder. The totality of the evidence seized during the searches provided grounds for the immediate arrest of Jeffrey Willis. He was charged with the abduction of Jessica Hiringa and the commission of a serious crime against her, as well as with the murder of Rebecca Bletch and the attempted kidnapping of the girl from Laketon Township, which ultimately led to his apprehension. Later, Willis was also suspected of an unsolved attack on a student at Fruitport High School in October 1996. Investigators learned that Jeffrey was a frequent visitor to the gas station where Jessica worked. He had been seen there at least 15 times. This led to the idea that he might have chosen her as his victim in advance and put his plan into action on the night of April 26. The next day, colleagues noticed scratches and abrasions on Willis's face and hands, which they immediately reported to the police. An analysis of his cell phone records showed that around 11:30 p.m., the suspect was at an abandoned property located a 15-minute drive from the gas station. This land had been inherited by him from his grandfather. Although a search of the site failed to uncover any traces of Jessica, bleach and other cleaning agents were found, likely used to cover up evidence of the crime. All the collected evidence was sent for forensic examination. As the investigation approached its final stage, the prosecution decided to bring the case to trial and seek the maximum punishment for the perpetrator. The court proceedings in the case of Jessica Hiringa's disappearance began in May 2018, even though her body had never been found. However, the evidence gathered proved so compelling that the prosecution chose to build its case even without the main piece of physical evidence, the victim's remains. The jury was presented with all the materials from the investigation, physical evidence, data from the suspect's computers, weapons, and eyewitness testimony. Prosecutors insisted that Jeffrey Willis had been stalking Jessica for an extended period, waiting for the right moment, and on the night of April 26, he lured her into his minivan. The girl appeared to have resisted and sustained injuries, but the kidnapper forcibly took her to another location. There, Willis subjected Jessica to brutal torture before killing her. Investigators surmised that the victim fought desperately for her life and even managed to wound her tormentor, but it did not save her from death. After disposing of the body, Jeffrey continued to pretend as if nothing had happened and went on living his usual life. It took the jury a mere hour and a half to reach a unanimous verdict, guilty. Jeffrey Willis was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The same sentence was handed down in December 2017 when his case regarding the murder of Rebecca Bletch was heard. But even after the killer was behind bars, one detail continued to trouble investigators: the whereabouts of Jessica Hiringa's remains remained unknown. Although hardly anyone doubted that she had perished, her loved ones still hoped to find her body in order to say goodbye properly and finally put an end to this tragic story. Unexpectedly, Kevin Bloom, Jeffrey's cousin who had previously worked for the Michigan Department of Corrections, became involved in the case. In June 2016, he himself was accused of providing false testimony. Kevin possessed information about details of the crimes that had never been disclosed. Initially, he pleaded guilty but later changed his stance, agreeing instead to a charge of being an accessory after the fact. According to Kevin, Jeffrey committed the abduction and murder, while he merely helped dispose of the body. Bloom recounted that the day after Jessica's disappearance, Willis called him and invited him over, ostensibly for a party. However, when Kevin arrived, there was no celebration to be found. Instead, he saw Jessica, bound, unconscious, with severe head injuries. By his account, he and Jeffrey wrapped the girl's body in a sheet, loaded it into the car, and drove to a remote spot near the intersection of Sheridan Highway and Laketon Road. There, Willis had prepared a grave in advance. After burying the body, the accomplices went their separate ways, as if nothing had happened. Even as the investigation neared its end, Jeffrey Willis continued to deny any involvement in Jessica Hiringa's disappearance. During the sentencing, he ostentatiously left the courtroom just as the relatives of Rebecca Blech were delivering their pain-filled statements. The judge did not react to this audacious gesture, which shocked those present. It was this very incident that prompted Rebecca's family to push for the introduction of a law that would require defendants to be present in the courtroom during all victim impact statements. This legislative initiative, known as the Rebecca Blech Law, was passed by the Michigan State Senate on May 10, 2018, and signed by Governor Rick Snyder on May 24. Meanwhile, Jessica Hiringa's family expressed outrage that at such a large and busy gas station, where their daughter and sister worked, there was not a single surveillance camera. Even greater disbelief and dismay was caused by the fact that a young woman was left alone to face all the dangers of the night shift. After all, being alone in a public place late at night is always a considerable risk for a member of the fairer sex. Jessica's loved ones are convinced, if there had been at least one other employee present that night, the tragedy could have been averted. At the initiative of the deceased's parents and the local community, a bill was drafted that came to be known as Jessica's Law. Adopted on December 9, 2013, it required all 24-hour retail establishments to be equipped with video surveillance systems and to have at least 2 employees on duty during night shifts. The law was intended to protect those who have to work late, especially young girls, students, and high school seniors. However, although more than 12 years have passed since then, the law has not been finally approved. The main argument against it was the excessiveness of the financial burden that would be placed on small businesses if such requirements were introduced. Installing cameras and paying for additional staff at night would entail considerable expenses, but isn't human life the highest value, one that outweighs profits? Unfortunately, in the corridors of power, priorities were set differently. Jeffrey Willis himself refused to reveal where he had hidden Jessica's body. Even after being sentenced to life in prison, he continues to keep this a secret, perhaps to maintain power over her family or simply to take pleasure in the suffering of the people he wronged. Loved ones still haven't given up hope of finding Jessica's remains so that they can lay her to rest with dignity and ease their pain a little. The tragedy affected other family members as well. In 2014, shortly after Jessica's disappearance, her partner and father of their son Zevin, Dakota, was arrested for drug possession. As a result, Jessica's sister Samantha filed a petition for emergency custody of the boy. Zevin's subsequent fate remains unknown. He must be about 18 years old now. He lost everyone closest to him, and his life was changed forever. The tragedy of Danila Ulitti, from disappearance to horrific discovery. On July 16, 2024, a quiet town in Chile was shaken to its core. Danila Ulitti, a young woman of 23, vanished without a trace after visiting her grandparents. The last thing she told her family was that a stranger had offered to give her a ride home. But instead of a safe return, the search led to a dead end. Danila's body was found in a desolate location. The signs left no doubt, this was no accident. Danila, the family's darling. Born in Chile into a religious and close-knit family, Danila Antonio Ulitti Vanillas grew up as the second daughter of Luis Antonio Ulitti and Claudia Vanillas. Her older sister Vale and younger sister Constanza completed the family's happiness. Danila's quiet and homely childhood was spent with her parents, especially in the company of her sisters, with whom she had an unbreakable bond. Even her teenage years brought no storms. School and church in Conception, where the family lived, remained the only reasons to leave home. Gifted and motivated, after school Danila initially dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. But in the end, she decided to study to become a laboratory technician and specialize in working with blood. Her family remembers her as kind, homely, sensitive, gentle, and always ready to help. By 2024, having finished her studies, she planned to get a job, buy a home and a car to take her parents on trips. The fateful day. But all her plans were shattered on the morning of July 16th. It was a typical cool Tuesday in the family's house. At the request of her mother Claudia, Danila prepared to take medicine to her grandmother Juana. Having suggested that her sister Constanza go with her, Constanza stayed home to prepare prepare for classes. They agreed that until Danila returned, Constanza would take care of household chores and prepare lunch. It was a religious holiday. The older sister Vale planned to visit relatives. Around 10 a.m., Danila kissed her family and left the house. Having traveled by bus, she walked part of the way, even taking a photo against the background of the road leading to her grandmother's house. Having spent some time with her relatives, around noontime she headed back home. The last message. Around 12:16 p.m., Constanza received a message from Danila saying that she was returning and that a man, whom she called a knight, would give her a ride. Constanza asked her to send the exact location, but Danila only sent her current location from the bus stop, from where, as it turned out, that man had picked her up. After 45 minutes, Constanza started writing to Danila, but no response came. She notified Vale and their parents, who rushed to call, but Danila's phone was already turned off and messages were not being delivered. The search. Having not received a response, the Ulity family began searching on their own. They immediately posted a photo of Danila on social media with her description and information, hoping to establish her location as soon as possible. Having lost hope of finding her on their own, parents Luis Antonio and Claudia turned to law enforcement. Having filed an official statement, they publicly urged anyone who had any information to notify rescuers, leaving personal phone numbers for contact. The family believed that the girl would be found alive and unharmed. The investigation. After the statement, the authorities immediately launched a large-scale investigation coordinated by the prosecution and a special police unit for crimes against persons, known as PDI. Anxiety and despair grew by the hour, but the family did not lose hope, continuing the search. The tragic discovery. However, the very next day, July 17, 2024, almost 24 hours later, a resident of the surrounding area contacted the police with alarming news. In a wooded area near a country road, he had come across the body of a young woman. Investigative teams urgently arrived at the scene. It was later officially confirmed that the body found was that of Danila Ulity. Nearby, they also found the clothes she had left the house in, and a fingerprint examination definitively established her identity. An examination of the body revealed sudden, fatal injuries inflicted by a piercing and cutting object. It was also stated that at the time of discovery, the girl was naked. A mobile phone was lying nearby. Despite damage to the device, experts managed to retrieve the SIM card. Later, this find became crucial to the investigation. The reaction of the family and community. The news of the tragic event struck the girl's loved ones, especially her parents, who had cherished hope until the last moment. This event stirred up society with a wave of sincere sympathy, and support for the family only intensified. Despite personal sorrow, Luis Antonio did not restrain his determination to achieve justice. He recalled his daughter's dreams of working with her parents, continuing family traditions, and the minutes spent together in church. The investigation continues. From July 18, new stages of the investigation were initiated. The prosecution instructed to collect and analyze footage from surveillance cameras along the route that Danila might have taken and near the place where the body was found. The goal was to identify the vehicle that might have been connected to the tragedy. At the same time, experts examined the PCB of her phone and were able to use geolocation signals to reconstruct the sequence of the girl's movements, which allowed them to reconstruct the picture of events hour by hour. Uncovering the suspect. Such a thorough investigation allowed investigators to identify a red car in the area with unique features, including the license plate number, which immediately drew their close attention. Reviewing the surveillance footage, at approximately 12 p.m. on July 16, detectives recorded the car turning onto the stretch of road where Danila had been before. Tracking the route, experts meticulously analyzed the frames, and in one recording saw a man driving alone. But just minutes later, in another video, Danila is clearly visible sitting next to him in the front passenger seat. It later became known that the driver was 37-year-old Jose Eduardo Eros, a local resident, married man, father of 2 sons, who worked at a fruit stand nearby. Medico-legal research. At the same time, a medical legal examination was underway. After completing all the procedures, on July 19, Danila's body was handed over to the family. The investigation took its course, and already on the evening of July 20th, a day later, a task force set out to apprehend the suspect. He was stopped when he was driving on the same road where he had picked up Danila a few days earlier and was in the same car with his family. Arrest and confessions. Jose Eduardo was arrested and taken to a police station where he was interrogated. At first, he contradicted himself in his answers, but after a few minutes, without a hint of remorse or detached cynicism, he confessed to the crime. During the interrogation, he described the course of events that day in detail. According to him, on July 16, around 11:30 a.m., taking advantage of the day off, he left his place of work and headed home. On the way, he saw Danila standing at a bus stop. He noted to himself that she was fragile and slender. Returning a few minutes later, he offered her a ride. She, suspecting nothing, agreed, and immediately wrote to her sister about the passerby. The criminal act. But instead of taking her home, Jose turned into the thickets of the forest, where the body was later found. He claimed that from the girl's reaction, he realized that she was startled, not understanding why he had deviated from the route. After that, he tried to approach her with the intention of aggressive courtship. When Danila began to resist, he dealt the first blow with a knife to her chest. He called the murder weapon an ordinary tool that he used at work, destroying the traces. Meanwhile, the police were inspecting the car in which Danila had been riding on the day of her disappearance. Jose admitted that he had owned the car for 3 years. The car appeared to be carefully washed and polished, but the tire treads clearly matched the tracks found at the crime scene. The final tribute. These events unfolded until July 21st, the day when relatives, neighbors, friends, and loved ones gathered to bid Danila a last farewell. The ceremony took place with the participation of the entire community united in support of the family. Results of the medical legal examination. According to the conclusions of the medical examiners, 2 penetrating wounds were found on the girl's body in the left part of the chest, 1 in the lateral part of the chest, an injury in the neck region, and 1 more on the right side of the face. The injuries to the chest and neck were inflicted while alive and proved fatal. The wound to the face was inflicted after death. On the fingers of the hands, cuts were noticed, characteristic of attempts to defend herself. The cause of death was determined to be penetrating injuries to the heart, which fully corresponded to the action of a piercing and cutting object. It was also stated that all the injuries were fresh, inflicted while alive, and were irreversible from a medical point of view. Additional investigations. The discovery of Danila's body in the wooded thickets, as well as the accompanying material evidence, prompted prosecutors to begin an additional investigation into the possible nature of the crime. At that time, the medical legal examination had not yet given a final answer on this issue. Bringing charges. Meanwhile, against the background of massive protests in society, where people demanded justice and life imprisonment for Jose Eduardo, on July 24, 2024, at 8:30 a.m., an official procedure for bringing charges took place. The prosecutor, who personally conducted the initial interrogations of the suspect, presented a detailed chronology of events. She noted that when news comes in about a woman's disappearance, the overwhelming majority already expects a tragic outcome. The prosecutor's office established that Jose Eduardo had tried to incline her to intimacy. But after the girl's refusal, he was pulling out a knife and dealing a fatal blow to the chest. Having committed the crime, he returned home, had a snack with his family, and then set about destroying the evidence, meticulously washing the car. Criminal past. In addition, it became known that the suspect had previously had problems with the law. There were recorded cases of robberies with threats, inflicting light bodily injuries, and damage to property. Considering all the circumstances, the prosecutor demanded a preventive measure for him in the form of detention, since he was a threat to society and might try to escape. A request was also filed for the appointment of a life term. The appeal. The defense tried to challenge the arrest, arguing that the accused had given 2 confessional statements, cooperated with the investigation, and voluntarily provided access to the phone and car without a lawyer and without a warrant. However, the court rejected this petition. The formal charge. José Eduardo was officially charged with a crime classified as feminicide, not related to close relationships. The judge ruled to keep him under arrest, referring to the threat to public safety. The term of the investigation was set at 4 months. It later became known that José Eduardo, while behind bars, was attacked by another prison. After that, he was transferred to another prison. Continuation of the case. In February 2025, 7 months after the tragedy, the prosecutor's office announced new investigative actions. It was decided to clarify the charges brought earlier in the context of a re-examination of the case. In March, the court again confirmed the need for detention. The defense lawyer tried to get a release. But the judge rejected the petition, emphasizing the gravity of the charges, the severity of the alleged crime, and the risk of escape. The court also noted the particular cruelty with which the crime was committed, which became an additional reason for refusing release. Completion of the investigation. On May 14, the investigation was supposed to be completed, as the term set by the court was expiring. However, unexpectedly, José Eduardo's defense postponed its own petition to close the case. In response, the court set a new hearing date, the end of June 2025, where it was planned to discuss the completion of the investigation. In the opinion of the lawyer for Daniela's family, further investigative measures were no longer needed, and he expected a quick transition to the stage of formulating the official charge and starting the trial. Possible punishment. A criminal charged with feminicide in Chile faces imprisonment for a term of 15 years and 1 day to life imprisonment. Conclusions. The case of Daniela Yulity left a deep imprint not only on her family but also on society as a whole. The disappearance and tragic denouement exposed the vulnerability of women to aggression and demonstrated the serious shortcomings of the system. The end of June 2018 brought a troubling call to the Kalamazoo Police Department regarding one of the student housing complexes. Law enforcement expected a routine welfare check, but the case turned out to be far more serious. It involved the disappearance of 24-year-old Western Michigan University student Anna Mack. For several days, her close friends had been unable to reach her, which was completely out of character for this young woman. Although there were no obvious signs of foul play in her residence, the atmosphere inside raised concerns. Soon, the investigation received crucial information that fundamentally changed the direction of the case and revealed the horrifying truth about what happened to Anna. On the night of June 28, 2018, law enforcement arrived at the Hunter Ridge Apartments housing complex, located in the western Michigan area. This multi-story building with its own parking facility was designed exclusively for student housing. Police were searching for Anna Mack, a psychology student at the local university. Her friends had lost contact with her since the previous week. Anna was exceptionally sociable and actively participated in various activities. During her high school years, she was a member of student council, belonged to the Medical Specialties Association, played in the school orchestra, participated in a support group, and competed on volleyball and softball teams. Continuing her education at the university, she sang in the church choir and performed with a dance troupe. Her sudden disappearance for several days without notice was completely uncharacteristic of her. Anna's friend, Lindsay Watson, was the first to raise the alarm and called the Kalamazoo police. Usually, the girls maintained daily phone contact, but now all calls were going straight to voicemail. Lindsay's concern intensified after visiting the Great Lakes Alternative Research Center, where Anna worked with children with special needs. There, she was told that the girl hadn't shown up to work for 2 consecutive days. This was particularly alarming since she had only gotten this position 3 months earlier and was extremely pleased with her new job. Another close friend of Anna's, Dominic Thomas, met with police officers outside her house. He had managed to speak with the girl's mother, Laurette, who lived in Louisiana separately from her daughter. All 3 were extremely worried, as Anna had never disappeared without explanation before. Police determined that Anna used a white 2008 Chevrolet Malibu. The vehicle was found in the parking lot near her house, but without license plates. Next to it sat an identical Malibu, but with Anna's plates, though it was registered to a man named Gustav. Both cars had flat tires and clearly couldn't be driven. When officers approached Anna's apartment, they noticed that lights were on inside and the television was running. However, no one answered their knocking. While police tried to establish contact with neighbors and gather additional information, one of Anna's friends revealed that she had been in a complicated relationship with a 25-year-old man named Donovan Lewis, whom friends called Donnie. Donovan Lewis had previously played basketball at the local college and worked as an assistant at the YMCA center. For a period, he lived in Indianapolis, where he completed an internship at a multimedia company. After returning to Kalamazoo, he took any available work. Most recently, he had been working as a night shift janitor at a large local factory. Police learned about the complicated relationship between Anna and Donovan. Their conflicts had repeatedly required intervention from those around them. In one episode, Donovan poured water on Anna, and once, when she approached his car, he caught her hand in the window and drove off, dragging the girl along. By the time police arrived at Anna's apartment, her roommate Courtney had arrived and agreed to let the officers inside. She explained that she rarely crossed paths with Anna due to their different schedules. They had been living together for less than a year. The housing arrangement had been organized by the student complex itself. Courtney said that she had returned from work early in the morning and then went to the movies. She had last seen Anna approximately on Saturday. At that time, the girl had gone to a graduation ceremony. When she returned home, she noticed that someone had turned on the air conditioner and started the washing machine. Inside the drum were men's clothing and 2 beige bathroom rugs. But in Anna's bathroom, where there was a bathtub filled with water, there were no rugs. Police noted that Anna's personal belongings, items she would certainly have taken with her if leaving, remained in the room. This raised questions, as did the situation with her cars. Both Chevrolet Malibus she used were sitting in the parking lot in non-working condition. If Anna had decided to leave, what transportation would she have used? While officers examined the apartment, they discussed the situation. One believed there were no signs of serious threat yet. Another was convinced that the circumstances were too strange to ignore. At this point, no one could yet imagine how this investigation would end. Police noticed a strange detail. Someone continued coming to Anna's apartment, even though she herself hadn't been in contact for several days. Her roommate hadn't seen her for almost a week but didn't attach particular significance to this. Donovan himself wasn't answering calls. Everything known about him was relayed by Anna's friends. Dominic and Lindsay said he too was trying to reach her, but unsuccessfully. One of the officers found out his mother's address and went there, but no one was home. Then Anna's friend and goddaughter Lavenda contacted police again. She reported that Donovan worked as a night janitor at Stryker, a company that manufactures medical equipment. He finished his shift at 3:30 a.m. He was planning to return to Anna's apartment after work. Police decided to intercept him and return to the Hunter Ridge housing complex. By that time, Courtney and Dominic had already left. No one answered at the apartment, so the officers decided to wait outside. They pondered how Donovan's behavior seemed strange. If a girl had disappeared, her boyfriend should be more worried than anyone. Police were standing by their car discussing their suspicions when suddenly a man in a black t-shirt, beige shorts, and carrying a backpack approached them. Without hesitation, he admitted that he had committed a crime. Police immediately called for backup and began sorting out the situation. The man was arrested, read his rights, and asked where Anna was. He offered no resistance and was ready to tell everything. Donovan said that some time ago he had taken Anna's phone and seen messages in it that deeply upset him. He discovered that she had been having an affair. At first, he tried to cope with this. He told himself that everything was fine, that he could leave it in the past and move forward. They reconciled and for a while everything was fine between them. However, recently conflicts began arising between them again. On Sunday they argued because Donovan couldn't find stable work after returning to the city. Anna stated that he wasn't doing enough to solve his problems. He suggested asking his father for help, but this only infuriated her. The argument continued from Saturday, and on Sunday the tension reached its peak. When police arrested Donovan and put him in the patrol car, he began telling all the details. He admitted that Anna would never return and indicated that she should be sought in the river on the east side of the city. Law enforcement immediately realized that the case, which had begun as a missing person investigation, had transformed into a serious criminal matter. The police officer who accompanied Donovan to the station continued the conversation with him. Donovan offered no resistance and voluntarily shared details. According to his testimony, shortly before the tragic incident, he had discovered messages from her pastor on Anna's mobile phone. He was convinced that intimate relations existed between them, and claimed that Anna was using this connection for her own benefit. He recounted that while he was in another city, the pastor provided Anna with financial support, paid her rent, phone bills, and even provided her with a second car. In recent weeks, this car had been having problems, the tires deflated several times, and on Sunday, when Anna was preparing to go to church, she discovered that the front wheel was flat again. This aroused her suspicions. On Sunday, a serious argument occurred in Anna's residence, caused by the strained relationship with the pastor of Second Baptist Church. This man, Strickland, was not only a clergyman but also a married man, as well as the local president of the NAACP organization. Anna had begun attending his church at the beginning of the year, and gradually their communication began to extend beyond the usual relationship between a parishioner and pastor. According to Donovan, the pastor repeatedly provided Anna with monetary assistance, paid for vehicle repairs, and at one point gave her a second car that she could use. However, soon this car also began breaking down. The pastor appeared more and more frequently at Anna's apartment, picked her up, and once even invited her on a trip to his native state of Mississippi with the church choir. Donovan claimed that Anna had confessed to him that she was using this connection for her own purposes. When she threatened to tell the pastor's wife and others about what was happening between them, Strickland allegedly began threatening her. On that fatal evening, Donovan was drunk. He had barely slept because he had spent all night checking Anna's phone and encountering new messages from the pastor. This finally enraged him. Another argument began between them. Anna said she no longer wanted to see him in her house, got out his suitcase, and began packing his things. According to Donovan's confession, at this moment he struck Anna, causing her to lose consciousness. Then he went to the kitchen, took a knife, and returned to the bedroom. He admitted to inflicting fatal wounds, then put a garbage bag over her and placed the body in the suitcase. Later he carried out the suitcase and left it in a dumpster in the guest parking lot. The next day, already at dusk, he returned, retrieved it using his mother's car, and took it to Comstock Creek on the east side of the city. There he threw the suitcase into the deep current, covering it with dirt so it wouldn't float. Investigators began to doubt the details of Donovan's story. They were particularly troubled by the absence of obvious signs of crime in the apartment. Officers who examined the crime scene found no significant bloodstains, although in such an attack they should have been present. However, upon more thorough examination, large traces were indeed found, on the bedroom carpet, on the edge of the bed, and in the hallway. It was also discovered that cleaning supplies had been used in the apartment to conceal possible evidence. Donovan had thrown the mattress pad into a dumpster near the building, but by that time it had already been collected. Bathroom rugs remained in the washing machine, and he had disposed of his clothing at his mother's house. Anna's personal belongings, wallet, bank cards, and documents, he threw into a trash bin near his workplace. Only part of this evidence could be recovered. Police checked not only his words about the incident but also his statements about the pastor. Strickland claimed that Anna was his parishioner and choir member. He denied any personal connection with her. Later, Donovan admitted that Anna never directly spoke about an affair with the pastor. She only claimed that she was using this situation to her advantage. Strickland said that Anna had traveled with the church choir to Mississippi, where she met a young man and began dating him. However, she already had a relationship in Kalamazoo, so she tried to hide the new romance. According to the pastor, she had saved the new acquaintance's number under his name in her phone so that Donovan, seeing the messages, wouldn't suspect anything strange. About a month after the pastor gave his testimony, he contacted police again. He demanded the return of a white 2008 Chevrolet Malibu, but couldn't prove that the car belonged to him. He claimed he had purchased it from a person named Gustav, but had no documents confirming the transaction. However, this car became the least of his problems. Later that year, serious charges were brought against the pastor and his wife. 3 teenagers from the parish claimed that the pastor had committed improper acts against them. According to one of the victims, he felt he couldn't refuse the pastor's demands because he needed the car that the pastor provided him. Despite the accusations, Strickland continued to remain as pastor. He and his wife denied all charges, claiming their innocence. Meanwhile, public outrage grew, and the church found itself at the center of a major scandal. The investigation carefully studied Donovan's testimony, and detectives developed doubts about some details. In addition to physical evidence, investigators checked other details of Donovan's story. Pastor Strickland, whom Donovan accused of having relations with Anna, stated that she was his parishioner and choir member. He denied any personal connection with her. An investigation conducted by Michigan State Police confirmed that the pastor's alleged crimes occurred from January through May 2018. Text messages and photographs from victims' phones were collected as evidence. In 2023, the pastor reached a plea agreement with prosecutors and pleaded guilty to using a vehicle to facilitate unlawful activity. As a result, he was sentenced to 1 year in prison. Meanwhile, Donovan agreed to show police where he had hidden Anna's body. He pointed to an area near Comstock Creek Waterway on the east side of the city. Donovan, who was a good swimmer, had carried the body further into the water and submerged it in a deep spot. The search was complicated by the difficult terrain, so the rescue team deployed boats. Soon the suitcase was found and brought to the surface. After recovering the body, investigators continued examining the area. In searching for the murder weapon, Donovan stated that he had thrown a knife with a black handle into the water near where he had left the suitcase. However, the murder weapon could not be found, despite thorough searching of the area. Anna's family could finally say goodbye to her and bury her. 3 days before trial, Donovan was on a recreational walk in the yard of Kalamazoo County Jail, playing soccer with other inmates. At some point, he suddenly stopped playing and rushed toward the fence. He managed to climb over 2 walls over 4 meters high, overcome barbed wire fencing, and escape beyond the facility's boundaries. Half an hour later, he was captured again. During questioning, he stated that he wasn't trying to escape punishment but was acting out of fear for his family. According to him, his relatives were receiving threats, but he provided no evidence of this. He pleaded guilty to escape. Anna's relatives didn't want to go through a painful trial process, so prosecutors offered a plea deal. At the end of 2018, Donovan pled down to second-degree murder. At trial, he apologized to Anna's family, saying he understood the pain he had caused. The judge noted that Donovan had many opportunities in life and a good education, but he had destroyed everything he had. The court emphasized that Anna didn't deserve such treatment. She shouldn't have had to suffer, lose consciousness, endure an attack, and be discarded like an unwanted object. For this crime, Donovan received 25 to 40 years in prison. He also received an additional sentence of 17 months to 4 years for the escape. Anna's sister said she was satisfied with the verdict because her family found justice in it. She acknowledged that she couldn't forgive Donovan yet, but might find the strength to do so in time. Pastor Strickland, who served a short prison term for using a vehicle for unlawful purposes, changed his name to Floyd Strickland after his release. Cancun, a place where palm trees rustle in the wind and sand glistens white under the sun. But this time, there was blood on it. This is where the story of Sativa Transu begins, a girl with a Hollywood smile and a soul that radiated light. Next to her was a guy, Taylor, a walking red flag in human form. The type mothers warn their daughters about, saying, "There's something I don't like about him," while best friends whisper, "Are you sure everything's okay with him?" Imagine November, Thanksgiving Day. Sativa dreamed of the warmth of home, a delicious turkey, and the embrace of family. Instead, she found herself in a Mexican hotel with a boyfriend who had absolutely no self-control. At first, he lashed out at the furniture and staff, and then at her. Just 2 days, and contact with her was lost. No calls, no messages, only oppressive silence. And then a voice rang out, as if from a nightmare, a voice from the American consulate: "Your daughter has been found dead in a Cancun hotel." This is where the real story begins. Not about a passionate resort romance, but about fear and the indifference of the system. About hotel security that heard the screams but did not intervene. About a doctor who wanted to help but allowed himself to be convinced otherwise. About how a heavenly corner turns into hell when you lock a victim there with her tormentor. Sativa tried to escape until the last second, already with a bag on her shoulder. But she didn't make it in time. This is not a romantic story under the palm trees. This is a chronicle of a deadly vacation. Jamie Bolo was going about her daily routine one November morning in 2021. The clock showed 9 when her phone rang. An unknown number. At first she wanted to ignore it, fearing another spam call. But something made her pick up the receiver. And as soon as she said, "Hello," her whole world turned upside down. On the other end of the line was an employee of the U.S. consulate in Mexico. Jamie felt the ground slipping from under her feet when she heard the words, "Sativa Transu, dead, hotel." Sativa, her daughter, who was just on vacation in Cancun with her boyfriend of 3 years. For Jamie, life could have stopped at that moment. But very soon she realized, she needed to act. Find the one who did this. Get justice for her girl. Sativa Transu came into the world on May 19, 1995 in the city of Spokane, Washington. At the age of 12, she moved with her parents to Cheney, a place that would later become her home. She had a younger sister, Michaela, and the girls were inseparable, more than sisters, best friends. Sativa graduated from Cheney High School in 2013, and then entered Eastern Washington University to study sports science. She dreamed of working in the fitness industry and planned to become a massage therapist. In her senior year, her infectious laughter was known to all her classmates. It was for this quality that she was chosen as one of the most charming in her class. And although it sounds like a cliché, Sativa was truly a girl who knew how to enjoy life. She adored sunny days, bright colors, good movies and hearty food. She just knew how to appreciate every moment. June 2017, right after graduation, Sativa moves to Milton, Washington. Despite the lack of acquaintances in the new city, she quickly settles in and makes friends. Her sincerity and charm leave no one indifferent. In particular, they attract the attention of Taylor Allen. They met back in Cheney when they worked together. According to mutual acquaintances, Taylor was the complete opposite of Sativa. She was like a breath of fresh air, energetic and lively. And he seemed quirky from the very beginning. More aloof and reserved than Sativa, but at the time it did not raise concerns. Their couple rather resembled a story about how opposites attract and complement each other. The problem was that Taylor was actually very insecure. He constantly doubted that he deserved Sativa, afraid that she would leave him or cheat. He himself did not fully understand the origins of these fears, but it was clear to everyone around, this was clinical paranoia. In moments of heightened anxiety, he would start monitoring the girl's correspondence through his laptop. Every message she received instantly appeared before his eyes. From the outside, Taylor seemed like the perfect boyfriend, attractive, witty, sociable. But behind closed doors, he was tormented by demons. And very soon he began to isolate Sativa from everyone. Forbade her to see family and friends. And if she still dared to go out to them, then she would get a scandal afterward. In the end, she almost stopped leaving the house, distanced herself from loved ones. As if that wasn't enough, Taylor started using. They only worsened his paranoia. Once in a conversation with a friend, Sativa let slip that in such moments he becomes a complete beast. The girl found herself in an extremely difficult situation, but her boyfriend, apparently, was even deeper in trouble. Moreover, he himself began to sell and came to the attention of the police several times. Once he was even arrested, which should have been the last straw for their relationship. When Sativa's sister Michaela came to visit, Taylor never showed his face to her. But the girl immediately noticed holes in the walls, overturned shelves, smashed furniture, broken glass. She suspected something was wrong, but Sativa kept silent. Taylor completely destroyed their relationship. Sativa found herself trapped, forced to endure his antics, even if with all her heart she wanted to leave. As soon as she would mention it, he threatened to take his own life if she left him. In November 2021, Thanksgiving arrived. Sativa really wanted to spend it with her family. She hadn't seen them for so long and just yearned to be with loved ones. But Taylor had other plans. He organized a trip to Cancun, Mexico, at the same time when Sativa was going to her parents. It is still unclear whether this was a coincidence or a deliberate plan. But many are sure that Taylor effectively blackmailed Sativa into choosing him over family. She felt how isolated she was from everyone. And in the end, she agreed. Sativa adored Cancun, it was her favorite vacation spot. So it's no wonder Taylor chose this particular city. He knew she couldn't refuse. The news of the trip shocked all the couple's friends and relatives. Their former boss, Stacy Shirley, told a story that clarified a lot. According to her, Taylor had a terrible temper. She remembers how once he was assembling a table for her at the office. Something went wrong, he got angry and smashed the furniture with a sledgehammer. This incident showed that Taylor absolutely could not cope with disappointments and failures. And his aggression often spills out on everything around. Furniture is only the first line of defense. A person who had been dating Sativa for 3 years. During this time, she tried to break up with him several times, but each time he found the right words to get her back. Obviously, Taylor had serious psychological issues that he just couldn't deal with. But in the end, Sativa still agreed to that fateful trip to Cancun. She firmly decided, after returning to Milton, she would finally end this toxic relationship. But it never happened. Because Sativa did not return from Cancun. At least not alive. On November 25, 2021, Sativa and Taylor flew to Mexico. And true to himself, Taylor could not refrain from a scandal already at the airport check-in. It seemed that the concept of peace did not exist for him, the vacation promised to be tense from the first minutes. Before boarding the plane, Sativa still wrote to her sister, congratulated her on Thanksgiving and said how much she loved her. And then photos appeared on her social networks, the sun, the beach, her smiling face. It might seem that the girl was sincerely enjoying the vacation. But just a couple of days later, Sativa's worried friends began to call Michaela. Before that, her sister was constantly in touch, sharing impressions and photos. And then suddenly, she disappeared. The phone is silent. And one of the friends told a terrible thing. The last time Sativa wrote that she and Taylor had a conflict that escalated into a physical confrontation. So serious that the girl needed medical help. Relatives sounded the alarm. It had never gone this far before, everyone was at a loss as to how everything could have gone downhill so quickly. They tried to call Sativa, in vain. They wrote, no answer. Anxious hours gave way to even more anxious ones. The girl's phone remained silent. All messages were left unread. At dawn the next day, Jamie, Sativa's mother, was awakened by a phone call that forever divided her life into before and after. At the end of November 2021, on one fatal day, the life of Sativa Transu's loved ones stopped. The American consulate in Mexico called her mother, and the words she heard were like a punch in the gut. Sativa was found dead in a hotel room. Her body was not just lifeless. It eloquently testified to the terrible events that preceded the girl's death. Every inch of her skin was covered in bruises and injuries, the sight of which made one's blood run cold. For Sativa's relatives, an exhausting struggle for the truth began. They tried to figure out how and why it happened, overcoming distances and language barriers. There were more questions than answers, but they were not going to back down. Michaela, the sister of the deceased, together with other family members, collected information bit by bit. Eyewitness accounts, surveillance camera footage, police reports, everything was used to reconstruct the events of that tragic day. And it started quite ordinarily, as much as possible when you are in a foreign country with a person next to whom you do not feel safe. On the evening of November 26, Sativa and her boyfriend Taylor were seen in a restaurant. According to witnesses, everything looked peaceful between them. But this illusion of tranquility was very soon dispelled. After dinner, the couple went to the bar. They drank, and at some point Sativa noticed that Taylor was openly flirting with another patron. For the girl, this was the last straw. All the pain from the toxic relationship, all her attempts to break out of it, all this was negated by one moment of betrayal before her eyes. When Taylor, who was 31 at the time, was caught red-handed, he behaved like a spoiled child. Threw a tantrum, started throwing things and turning everything around. The security of the establishment was forced to throw him out the door. On the way to the hotel, he continued to behave inappropriately, jumping over fences, falling, muttering something incomprehensible. The staff asked Sativa to keep him in the room until morning. But even once in the room, Taylor did not calm down. Soon, calls began to come to the reception, female screams were heard from the couple's room. When the hotel employees went up to the fourth floor, a shocking sight awaited them. Before them stood Sativa with a deep wound on her chin, which stretched for a good 4 centimeters. What exactly happened behind closed doors is not known for certain. But all signs pointed to a brutal skirmish in which the girl was seriously injured. The cut was so deep that stitches had to be applied. Sativa was taken to the lobby, where she was examined by a doctor. At this time, Taylor, being in complete prostration, climbed out of the room window and found himself near the air conditioners. The guards found him there when he was babbling something about jumping from the balcony and could not understand where he was. The staff called the police, but by the time they arrived, Taylor had already been taken back to the room. So it turned out that the law enforcement officers did not talk to him or Sativa then. Perhaps if they had, subsequent events would have unfolded quite differently. While the girl's wound was being sutured, she kept repeating that she had fallen herself. She insisted that Taylor had not hit her, that they loved each other. According to the medic who provided assistance, he suggested that Sativa spend the night in another room. But she supposedly refused. Michaela could not believe these statements. She was outraged that her sister, finding herself in a foreign country, without knowledge of the language, suffered from the cruelty of a man who was physically much stronger than her. In her opinion, Sativa was simply too scared and did not even understand the doctor's offer. The girl was indeed transferred to another room on the first floor to prevent Taylor's attempts to jump out of the window again. And what happened next, no one knows. The only thing that is known, deep into the night, desperate female screams were heard again from the couple's room. But this time, no one called, not even the reception. No one called the police. Everyone who heard those blood-curdling wails just turned away and pretended nothing had happened. The head of hotel security also heard everything. But he did not take any action. The employees of the establishment and the guards were allegedly simply afraid of Taylor, a big guy with outbursts of aggression. They should have been responsible for the safety and comfort of guests, but in the end they were just afraid to intervene. In the morning, Taylor came out of the room, seemingly calm and in his right mind. He informed the administrators that his girlfriend was unconscious. When the staff finally unlocked the door, a horrifying picture opened before their eyes. Sativa was lying on the floor by the bed, face down. From head to toe, her body was dotted with bruises and scratches. A bag still hung over her shoulder. It seems the girl was trying to escape from Taylor, to pack her things and leave. But she did not make it in time. The investigators who arrived at the scene almost immediately realized, Sativa had not just lost consciousness. She was dead. The body was sent for autopsy. The forensic expert stated without hesitation, death was preceded by a brutal beating. The girl was simply unrecognizable. Taylor had beaten her to death with his own hands. On Sativa's body, many traces were found that indicated that she had desperately defended herself. But all her efforts were in vain. A slender girl weighing 63 kilograms had no chance against an enraged Hulk of 100 kilograms. She was defenseless against his unrestrained cruelty. Sativa's death turned out to be so terrible and senseless that her loved ones still cannot recover. They blame themselves for not noticing the signs of trouble in time and not being able to prevent the tragedy. Now the police had to find the killer. And very soon all the evidence began to point to Taylor Allen. He was immediately arrested. Since Sativa was originally from Washington and died in Cancun, the family wanted to bring the body home. In her homeland, they planned to conduct another autopsy and bury the girl where she was born and raised. But the procedure of transporting across the border turned out to be very expensive. The family simply did not have that kind of money. Michaela opened a page to raise funds. She was determined to bring her sister home, give her a dignified farewell, and achieve justice. The girl was not going to give up. She was ready to do anything to ensure that the one who Sativa was, kind, bright, loving, would finally find peace. The only mistake of the deceased was that she endured Taylor's cruelty for too long, not daring to leave. The trial in Sativa's case took place in Mexico. This created additional difficulties. Relatives had to overcome huge distances, face a language barrier, spend a lot of time and resources on flights. On December 8, 2021, the family managed to hire a lawyer who began to cooperate with the prosecutor in this case. And the next day, Sativa's body was finally delivered to the USA. Relatives were able to say goodbye to her and accompany her on her final journey. But the story did not end there. The family was promised that the case would be referred to one of the strictest judges in Mexico. With the onset of 2022, Taylor's defenders requested 2 more months for additional investigation. The court granted this petition. But despite the fact that more than 2 years have passed since then, there is no news about the course of the process. The prosecutor's office demanded the maximum punishment for Taylor under Mexican law for such crimes, 50 years in prison. But why the sentence has not yet been passed is unknown. There are rumors that in a Mexican prison, Taylor tried to join a cartel and bribe someone to get out. But it seems he did not succeed. Sativa's relatives hope that after all these months of pain and tribulation, justice will finally prevail. But Taylor, apparently, was not the only one who should be held responsible for the girl's death. Michaela suspects that Taylor's mother, Rosa Duran, broke into Sativa's apartment after her death and stole valuables, including a safe and keys to both cars. Rosa constantly called the residential complex, begging to be let into Sativa's home. But since her name was not on the lease, the woman was refused each time. Shortly after her persistent calls, someone still got into the apartment. And then Rosa suddenly stopped calling. In addition, it was she who kept Shedl, Sativa's service dog. Although the girl never gave permission for this and was going to pick him up immediately after returning from Mexico. Relations between Rosa and Sativa have always been strained. The girl believed that Taylor's mother constantly controls her son and tries to manipulate them both so that after the vacation they move closer to her. It seems this woman also has to answer for her actions. Michaela set herself the goal of helping women who find themselves in toxic relationships, like her sister. She wants to teach them to recognize the warning signs and not be afraid to ask for help. The girl believes that Sativa would want her story to change someone's life and save someone from making the same tragic mistake. Michaela vowed not to stop until no woman has to go through what her sister endured. I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Until next time, friends.